Oregon, Washington, British Columbia. This is Cascadia. More widely known as the Pacific Northwest, we're known for a lot of stereotypes. Left-wing values, organic food, trees, mountains, fair trade coffee, hipsters, bikes, hipsters on bikes, a left-leaning hipster eating kale while riding his bike through a forest on the side of a mountain. But what about the independence movement? When we think of states breaking away from the US, we usually think of California or Texas. But if the US suddenly became an organ donor and these two states in one province went off on their own, what would it look like? Now, perhaps it's worth mentioning that an independent Cascadia will pretty much never happen. Both the United States and Canada are pretty certain on whether or not they want their states or provinces to leave. Spoilers, basically no country does. But what would it look like if, just say through the magic of hand-wavium, it just did? Now, this all depends on how you define where Cascadia ends and Cascadiaisms begins. You could just count the US states of Oregon and Washington and the Canadian province of British Columbia, but you could also make the borders look like this. Now, while this is generally what we think of as Oregon or Washington, so is this. East of the Cascade Mountains, things get a lot drier, a lot sparser, and the further right you go geographically, the further right you often get politically. But despite the aesthetic differences between the Willamette Valley and Eastern Oregon, the borders of Deluxe Cascadia reflect the larger Cascadia bioregion. And in the past, this rough area was actually all one territory, known as the Oregon Country, administered jointly by the United States and the British from 1818 until it was formally cleaved in half in 1846, although it wasn't a completely clean cut. But which set of borders do we go with in the year 20-something? Do we cut it off at the Cascade Mountains? Do we go for the state and provincial boundaries? Or do we cobble together some sort of grotesque Frankenstein's country by cutting up and mashing together all these different states and provinces? You could just count the US states of Oregon and Washington and the Canadian province of British Columbia, but there are also other ways to place the borders. Sticking with the state and provincial boundaries would make things easier in the short term, while going along the bioregional borders goes much more hand in hand with what this is all really about, a little term called bioregionalism. Bioregionalism is essentially the belief that human systems would work better if they were based on the boundaries of local bioregions, taking into account everything from watershed boundaries to soil characteristics, something we humans have occasionally done since these geographic features often make good defenses, but on a different level. If this were to realistically happen though, I'd place my odds more on the state and provincial borders than the ecological borders. If we go by the state and provincial lines, Cascadia would be the 19th largest country in the world, just ahead of Peru, and the 68th most populous, between the Netherlands and Senegal. With an overwhelmingly white European population,
wait, what are you focusing on me for?
The most common language by far would be English, followed by Spanish, Punjabi, Cantonese and Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Tagalog. In terms of religion, the largest portion of the population would be Christian, mostly some form of Protestant, followed closely by the irreligious population, followed way behind by Judaism and Islam. Now, if we're going to try to do this with Deluxe Cascadia, we could probably break it up along county lines, just to at least have a way to calculate things. Now, let's define Cascadia as, these counties here. That sort of matches our borders the best way we can. With these borders, Cascadia would have a population of 19,990,331. Actually, is Montana using Glacier County for anything? Let's just take that as well and say it's 20 million. With that, Cascadia would now be the 61st most populous country between Chile and Mali, and by area, we would still be in 19th place, but now we would almost rival Mongolia. The largest city and metro area in the region would be Seattle, followed by a near tie between Portland and Vancouver. Of the 10 largest cities proper in the region, 4 would be in Washington, 4 in British Columbia, and if we go with the bioregion, 1 in Oregon and 1 in Idaho, but with the state borders it becomes 2 in Oregon and, well, Idaho isn't included at all. No one has ever really specified what would be the capital of this new country. However, if for some reason I were allowed to pick, I would suggest Olympia, as it is already the current capital of Washington and more centrally located than Salem or Victoria. And it lies on the Amtrak Cascades route connecting the biggest cities of the region, with the Vancouver-Eugene corridor home to around 13 million people, all connected by rail within actually a pretty reasonable time for this continent. But could Cascadia succeed if it succeeds? Sticking strictly to the state and provincial boundaries, the combined GDPs of Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia would amount to $1.1 trillion, with the GDP per capita of around $69,153. This will put the Cascadian economy on par with Malaysia, and the average Cascadian, according to the IMF, on par with the average Dane. Whichever borders it settles on though, Cascadia will still contain the metro areas of Vancouver, Seattle, and Portland. All commercial powerhouses in their own right, says the Portlander desperately trying to make their city relevant. Home to companies by the likes of Amazon, Nike, Microsoft, Starbucks, TELUS, and numerous others, with Washington having the highest concentration of STEM workers in the US. Stupid Washington always outshining us. Seattle is often regarded as the Silicon Valley of the North, while Vancouver often receives the moniker of Hollywood North. So if Cascadia and California were to both become countries, we would quickly become California's Canada. Now, I've already mentioned that an independent Cascadia will pretty much never happen, at least not unless something horrific happens outside the region. Canada's constitution doesn't allow provinces to leave, and down south, the US is also quite certain on its position on state secession. And in fact, this entire movement isn't necessarily about breaking off from the US and Canada and forming a whole new nation. Although the Cascadia movement might talk about independence, it, generally speaking, is less hell-bent on gaining independence and more about fostering a sense of that bioregionalism I was talking about. According to Alexander Baratek, the original creator of the Doug flag, the whole Cascadia movement is less about seceding from the US and Canada and more about ensuring survival after peak oil and the full effects of climate change. And I mean, it's kind of hard not to care about the environment when you live near places that look like this.